All right, so now I want to do something a bit more speculative and think about a different way of combining or showing the compatibility of various religious doctrines and various scientific theories. So it seems to me that it is compatible to believe that God created humans in God's own image using the evolutionary development as God's mechanism for the creation of humans. That view, God created humans in God's own image, and evolutionary theory, which as a purely random process, not forward-looking, is responsible for the development of Homo sapiens. Those two seemingly incompatible views, I think, can be made compatible in the following way, without an assumption of intelligent design, and without assuming that God is intervening and directing a intrinsically arbitrary or random process. Instead, the way to make sense of the relationship between these two, or one way to think about the compatibility of these two views, is the following. God knows everything about the Earth, about the universe, about the development of the universe. And so anytime for us humans, with our limited understanding, anytime we see a mutation, what we see is a purely random process. However, for God's perspective, there are no purely random processes. What seems to us to be a purely random process is actually something that God understands perfectly well. Now, if that's the case, then it could have been that God set up our universe in a way to ensure that the evolutionary development of Homo sapiens, or evolutionary development of life on Earth, would eventually arrive at Homo sapiens. In that sense, God would be creating Homo sapiens in God's image, without intervening in the process at all. The reason that that could make sense and be compatible with evolutionary theory is God could have set up the universe in such a way that humans, or Homo sapiens, were an inevitable outcome of the evolutionary process on Earth. But from the perspective of the humans involved in explaining that evolutionary process on Earth, those changes are purely random. From God's perspective, those changes are not purely random. So evolutionary theory would still be a perfectly legitimate, explanatorily powerful, and predictive scientific theory for explaining the development of life on Earth, and it would posit a purely random process that eventually arrived at Homo sapiens. Whereas from God's perspective, there is no randomness. Those mutations are not actually random. If you understood the entire universe and all the principles governing it, then you too would see that these were not purely random processes. So in this way, if we think about the randomness of the process, the arbitrariness of the process of natural selection, or evolution in general, as a feature of human ignorance about the entire universe and how it fits together, but from God's perspective, there is no ignorance like that, then there would be no randomness from God's perspective. We can combine these two views without endorsing anything like an intelligent design idea.